All right, Shabbos, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Aschus Baruch Hashem. Thank you, Rabbi Richter, for giving the share the last 2 days. Aschus Baruch Hashem to be back with everyone. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Daniel and Batsheva Pavel of Hashmonaim Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shurim and drashos this month in memory of their father, the first yard site of their father, Rabbi Shmuel ben Yehuda Aryeh of Philadelphia. Rabbi Shmuel was a child survivor of Auschwitz, a Talmud Mufak of Rav Michal ber Weismandel. He left 90 plus descendants who are Yerei Shamayim. We hope that in Meretz Hashem his neshama has an aliyah and his family a nechama. With that, let us begin. We also dedicate our learning, of course, in the schus of our hostages. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu Meretz Hashem bring them all home to their families b'shalom and b'karov in the schus of our precious soldiers. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give them tremendous hatzlacha b'chol ma'aseh yadeim, allow them to be successful in all of their missions, and again also come back to their families b'shalom b'karov. And of course, it's important for us also to be makir tov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for bringing home Evan Gershkovich, who was the Wall Street Journal reporter, Baruch Hashem, who was freed, even back in the United States. Tremendous Yeshua. Halavai again, the schos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being matir asurim. He should bring back the rest of our hostages, as we mentioned before, b'shalom and b'karav as well. Also with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Lamed Ches 38. We are picking up in Meretz Hashem. Let's pick up on last two lines on 37b, Amri Nahar Doi. Just again to kind of get into the sugya a little bit. 2 lines up from the bottom. If a person goes ahead and sells purchases a palm tree from his friend, so we'll say this is actually very interesting. Again, as already we've seen, since the Rashbam has taken the reins, so Rashbam, of course, is tremendously different than Rashi in terms of the scope and depth of his parish. So we're going to do selected Rashbams today, but take a look at this Rashbam, the last one. He says, Mishipula Toma. So literally translated, if a person purchases a palm tree from his friend, he acquires, literally, Shipule means the base of the tree, ad tahoma, until the depths, ultimately, again, below the tree. Now, what this is saying is as follows. In general, we were talking about the concept of when purchasing trees, do you acquire surrounding land? So the general answer to that is no. The general answer is you only acquire land if you're acquiring a certain amount of trees. But the idea that the Naradim are coming to see over here is, even just on one tree, you obviously acquire the area upon which the tree itself is situated and all of the land beneath it. So for example, if let's say again I bought a palm tree from Ruvain, so of course I'm acquiring the land upon which the palm tree is situated and all the way down. So if Ruvain wanted to dig under the tree, he's not allowed to do that. Now what are the ramifications of acquiring the land with the tree? So the most notable ramification that Shmuel points out is, what if the tree dies? What if the tree dies? So do I have the ability to plant a new tree in its stead? So if you hold that you only acquire the tree, you don't acquire the karka, that essentially means all you do is you have that one tree. Once that one tree died, that's it, you're done. Masha'enki went to Naradim and saying, no. When you acquire the tree, you acquire that tree and all of the ground underneath it, so that even if that first tree dies, you have the ability to plant something new afterwards. Take a look at that Rashbam again. He says, Mishipuli atoma, last Rashbam on the daf, Shula b'targaminon, Shipului kilomar kalakarka b'shuli ha'ilan, dahainu svasa karka at the home shell karka. So in other words, when you acquire that tree, you acquire the land underneath the tree going all the way down. Sha'afa pisha dakel yichidihu, even though we're talking about one tree, utinan vafilu beis ein bo karka, normally in order to acquire land, you have to be acquiring a minimum of 3 trees. Hani mili svivo sa'ilan hu de'ein lo klum. Kamo sheyesh legima b'neian, v'chutzlan kamalei ora. V'salo, aval tachtov de'ilan mihas islay, de'chevan de'ilan leperos of kona, l'skayim mekarka zu, gam im yomos ha'ilon, yita achar b'mkomo. So what the Naradim is saying is like this. Whenever you're buying a tree, people are never just buying a tree. What they're buying is a right to have a tree, that even if this one dies, I'm going to plant something else in its place. Well, in order to do that, you have to own the land. You have to own the land underneath the tree as well. Okay? Top of Lamed Ches, 38 days. So we'll say this is the position of the Nardoim. Maskif le Rava. So I'll say what I just want you to remember in all of this is as follows. Essentially, there's two different land conversation when it comes to trees. When you're purchasing three trees, so what you're going to get included in that purchase are the trees, right? Included in your purchase are 3 trees and the land surrounding the trees in order to cultivate the trees. So what we walk away with from that sugya is, therefore if I'm buying less than 3 trees, I get a tree and no land. The Nardoim are coming and saying, let's qualify what no land means. No land doesn't mean no land. No land means no surrounding land. But what do I automatically acquire? The land in which the tree itself is situated. So in other words, where the actual tree sits, and beneath that belongs to me. Okay, Maskif la Rava. Rava says, 1 second, hold up here for a second. So V'lei Malei. So as I say, I'm purchasing this tree from Ruvain. So just to understand when this comes up, right? When is it going to become a problem? When is it a problem? When I purchase a tree from Ruvain, the tree dies. So now again, so I'm ready to do what? I'm ready to uproot the old one and go ahead and replant the new one. Ruvain is saying, what is Ruvain saying? What is Ruvain going to say? We're done here. We're done here. You bought the tree, right? You bought this tree. This tree died. You no longer have any rights. So Maskif la Rava. So Rava says, 1 second. Now my tree died. Why can't Ruvain say to me, V'lei malei, kurkima dirishka zevini lecha? I sold you garden coriander, kurkuma is coriander. Dirishka, I sold you garden coriander, right? Lech akor kurkuma, dirishka v'zil. Go uproot your coriander and get out of here. In other words, I will say, for example, what Rav is saying is like this. Imagine for a moment Ruvain didn't sell me a tree. Rather, Ruvain sold me tomato plants. I'm just using tomato because it makes a little bit more sense than coriander, at least for me. Right? Tomato plants, right? So what happens? He sells me a crop of tomatoes. So we'll say, so what's my entitlement? The tomatoes. I go, I harvest the tomatoes, and then what? I'm done. In other words, so why can't Ruvain, Rava says to me, why can't Ruvain say to me, I sold you this tree, which means as long as this tree is viable, producing peiros, to enjoy it. Once the tree is dead, you're done here. No difference than had I sold you garden coriander. You get the right to harvest the coriander, but once the crop is done, you're done as well. To which the Gemara says, Allah Amar Rava. Rava says, you're right. What's the case here? Beba machmas taina. So you're right. The case over here is something different. The case I will say over here is where I'm making a claim. In other words, I bought the tree. That's the piece we know to be true. I bought the tree, and I'm also saying, by the way, Ruvain, you also sold me the rights to the land underneath the tree, and I've been using that land for the years of Chazaka, and therefore it belongs to me. Take a look at the Rashbam, Ela Amar Rava. So we'll say the case is making a claim. We'll say, let's pause for just a second. So what Rava is saying is like this. Rava is saying, you're right. In general, when you purchase a tree, what do you get? One tree, what do you get? A tree. What don't you get? Land. Right? That's generally the way that it works. You purchase a tree, you get a tree and no land. What's the case here? The case is, I'm coming to it and I'm saying, Ruvain, this was different. You sold me the tree and the land underneath it. Finish the Rashbam. So baba machmas taina. Shetoi lemocher beferish machar tliya ilan bakar shetachtov lita achar bimkomo. I say to Ruvain, the claim that I'm making is, Ruvain, you sold me the tree, and you also sold me the land underneath it. Why would I buy the land underneath it? For exactly this reason, that should the tree die, I have the right to go ahead and plant another one in its stead. And again, I had a shtar. I've been living on this land, utilizing this land for 3 years. I've been utilizing this land for more than 3 years. Again, I wasn't careful with the shtar anymore, and therefore that's I'm claiming. So I'll say, so what Rav is coming along and Rav is saying is like this, then our Dharma are wrong. The Nardama wrong. When you buy a tree, you don't normally get land. One tree, right? When you normally buy one tree, even two trees for that matter, you don't get land. You get a tree. And therefore, again, it's no different than garden saffron. So therefore, again, if the tree dies, you're really done. You're really done. You don't have the right to go ahead and plant another tree in its stead. What's the case over here? The case over here is I had a different kind of arrangement with Ruvain. What was my arrangement? That I bought the tree and the land underneath it because I wanted the right that should the tree die to plant something new. So I have a taina, right? I'm claiming that I bought it. I'm also claiming what? Quote unquote residency, or in this case usage. I've been there for 3 years. I don't have the shtar anymore. That's my claim. So we'll say the Gemara says, and therefore again, what would be the halacha in that case? The halacha in that case is I'd be believed, right? I would be believed because at the end of the day, I have a taina and I have residency. Those two things should establish my chazaka. Beautiful. Okay. Now we have a problem. This is very interesting. So the problem the Gemara says is this sets up a potential conflict. How so? Let's say indeed I didn't buy the land. I just bought the tree. Right? And as we're establishing, when you stam just buy a tree, you get a tree, you don't get karka, you don't get land underneath it. So we'll say, so what's to stop me from exploiting this scenario? Right? In other words, let's say I just bought the tree from Ruvain. And now again, trees have, I don't know how long let's assume they have a long tree life, a shelf life, right? So now I've been utilizing that tree for 5 years. But let's say again, my arrangement with Reuben was just a tree, not land. What's to stop me from after 5 years from now, the tree dies, saying, look, what's to stop me from claiming that I bought the tree, right, which is my claim. I bought the land, and therefore I have right to go ahead and utilize the land underneath it. What's to stop me from making that claim, considering the fact that I've already been there for a number of years, and which is an easily exploitable situation? To which the Gemara says again. So the Gemara says. Let's say indeed it was an arrangement like garden coriander. So we'll say that's just becoming the example of where you're purchasing the item and not purchasing the land underneath it. Let's say this was a coriander arrangement, a garden coriander arrangement. So all I bought was the use of the tree, right? But not the ground underneath it. What should Ruvain, the owner, do in order to prevent me from exploiting the potential right to take over the land? To which the Gemara says, very simple. Ruvain needs to object. And this is that we've seen this already a number of times throughout the last couple of days. Halacha l'maisa, whenever someone is utilizing your land in a permitted way for a prolonged amount of time, you, the owner of the land, have to lodge some type. The word is not a complaint, but have to make a macha. You have to assert your ownership sometime over the course of that prolonged duration of usage. That's the halacha. That's the only way that you maintain proper ownership. Look at Rashbam for just a moment. Lodia Shalomach lo karka, elaki kurkima derishka, vishuv lo yachal liton achar shalosh star hayaliva avad, kevan demicha bo zeh hayalo lizar bishtaro. So as I said, really all it requires, it's actually pretty simple. All it requires is that over the course of the 3 years, the true owner goes in and says, by the way, just a reminder, everyone, the example we gave a couple of days ago was, once a year, you invite everyone over for the annual Kiddush on your field, right? On your field. Therefore, again, everyone should know that this belongs to me. The Gemara says, because if you don't say this, this is exactly what the Gemara said a couple of days ago, Hani mashkanta de surah, the kasa behachi, bim mishlam shnin ilan, tipak ara da below kasef. So what's mashkanta de surah? What's mashkanta de surah? Again, remember, I lend Ruvain $10,000. Ruvain goes ahead and instead of paying me back in cash, gives me a parcel of land that has a yearly usage value of $1,000. And he says, here, you can use this for 10 years. For 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, the debt is considered to have been paid. So I will say, so that is an easily exploitable situation. Here I'm going to be using Reuven's land for 10 years, right? What's to stop me at the end of that mashkanta desura duration from claiming ownership over the field? Right, the Gemara says, I kavishle l'shtar mashkanta, varle l'kucha hi biyadi, nami demehemen. We'll say, technically speaking, if I were to go ahead and hide the loan document, right? Hide the loan document and claim that that land belonged to me, what's to stop me from doing that? To which the Gemara says, how can I be believed? Would the rabbis institute something that ultimately, again, could cause Reuven, the true landowner, a loss? So how do you prevent that? And others will say, this is a good child. By the way, it's mashkanta desura, it's sharecropping, it's any scenario in which I'm going to be using someone else's land in a permitted way, but over a long duration. What's to stop me, the user, from asserting illegal ownership over that? Because remember, you're going to say at the end of the mashkanta desura, at the end of the sharecropping agreement, what can I turn around? I can turn around and say, hey, number one, I bought it from you. Number two, I have residency. I've been using it for all of these years. So what's to stop me from illegally claiming the land? Rather, the Gemara says, so again, you're right. During the period of mashkanta desura, what does Reuven have to do? Reuven has to, every once in a while, assert ownership. He has to make an announcement, invite everybody over for the annual Kiddush in order to show that he is still the true owner of the land. So too in any other scenario where someone else is using my land or someone, right, for a prolonged amount of time, the only way for me to maintain ownership over that is every year to make a macha. Every year to make a macha. And then circling back to the tree case, that's why, again, technically speaking, if Reuven sold me a tree, and again, normally we paskin a tree does not come with any land, even the land in which the tree itself is situated, and therefore once the tree dies, I'm done. Now again, if it's true that I bought the land, and halacha l'maisa again, then I have an obligation to go ahead and prove that. But if I did not buy the land, then ultimately, again, Reuven should be making a macha every year in order to ensure that I do not assert illegal ownership over that land. Incredible. All right, we'll say that's sugya. Fantastic. Mishnah. We'll say this is now a fantastic sugya. Shalosh aratos lechazaka. There are three different regions when it comes to chazaka. Now, we'll say, and this is in Eretz Yisrael itself. We're going to talk about this concept. Three different regions for chazaka. What are the three different regions? Yehuda, ve'ever hayardein, ve'hagalil. Right. So Yehuda, Ever Yarden, which is the Transjordanian lands, and the Galil. So we'll say. So essentially, what this really is it's the right. So three different regions, right? Transjordanian lands, Yehuda, which essentially is central Eretz Yisrael, and ultimately the Galil, which is the north. So what does this mean that there are three different regions? So the Gemara says, Haya bi Yehuda. Now I'll say, let me just have this outside for just a moment. We're going to see that the concept of macha, right? We've just established that how do you prevent someone from asserting ownership over your land? How do you do that? Macha. You assert your ownership. Literally, again, you lodge an objection. You assert ownership. Asserting ownership is only meaningful if what? If the person living on the land would hear about that assertion. Because I will say, remember again, if the person living on my land is really the owner of it, then he's going to have to be careful to maintain his document. Why would he be careful? We've already established people don't maintain paperwork for long amounts of time. After a certain point, they assume I've lived here enough time, I'm the owner. The only way they would know to go ahead and keep their documentation is if they hear someone lodging a complaint or someone else asserting ownership. So what the Gemara suggests, what the Mishnah is suggesting is, but the only way I'm going to know about a macha is if word travels. If word doesn't travel, I'm not going to know about a macha. So just coming attractions over here. So there are three regions in Eretz Yisrael: Yehuda, Ever Hayarden, and the Galil. So what are the ramifications of this? Watch this. So let's say again the owner was in Yehuda. So let's say again, let's assume for a moment I'm the owner of the land, and Ruvain is living on my land. And Ruvain, right? So Ruvain did a chazaka on land in the Galil, or Bigalil v'hechsik biYehuda, or ultimately again I'm in the Galil, and Yehuda is making a chazaka in my land. I'm sorry, Ruvain is making a chazaka in Yehuda. So I'll say, what's talacha? In a chazaka. In all of these cases, right, a chazaka is not established ad sheyehei imo b'medina achos, until I, the landowner, and Ruvain, the user, are in the same region. So the way it works in Eretz Yisrael is, in order for chazaka to be established, Ruvain, the user, has to be in the same region as I, the owner. And then in that case, if Ruvain uses the land for 3 years uncontested, then that's a chazaka. But if we're in two different regions, right, and Ruvain uses my land for 3 years, and I, quote unquote, don't object, that is not a chazaka. Let's look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam says, Haya, you see what I'm saying? In the widest lines, it's about 6 lines in. Haya is really very interesting. Haya, Bala Karka bi Yehuda, Vehichsik Bagalil. So I'll say, so let's say again, I'm the owner of the land. So I, the owner of the land, I'm in Yehuda, but my land is in the Galil. Shaya Karka Begalil, Vehichsik Ba'adam Shalosh Shana B'lo Macha. Now Ruvain lived on my land for 3 years. And during that entire time, I, the owner, never objected, right? Yehuda's in the Galil, living on my land. I'm in Yehuda, and Ruvain's been living on that land 3 years, objection-free. So what's the halacha? Eino chazaka. It is not a chazaka. Why not? Ki d'mefarish time b'Gemara distam Yehuda v'Galil k'shas schirum dami she'ein shayaros mitzuyos mizu lezu v'lo havis machaz bal karka macha. So let's listen to this. Rashbam already is foreshadowing a little bit. Halacha ma'is, we're going to see word did not travel from Yehuda to Galil. These regions, I will say, were really sealed off from each other. This is, of course, talking about when Eretz Yisrael was under non-Jewish rulership, right? So these regions were really sealed off from each other. The caravans did not travel from one to the other. So therefore, word did not travel. Therefore, if I'm in Yehuda and Reuben's living in my land in the Galil, even if I made a macha, ultimately again it wouldn't reach Reuven. So therefore again, below macha, eina chazak. In the first time, the stam Yehuda v'Galil shaskem dam shein shas v'lo havis macha ba'karka macha shahare ein mishiyagi lo lamachzik shemichazeh v'yizar b'shtaro. No one's going to tell, even if I make a macha, right? I'm in Yehuda. So I go ahead and I stand up and show, Chevra, Reuven is living in my land in the Galil, and it's my land. It's my land. Such a macha, such an objection is never going to reach, the Galil. Sorry, Yehuda. No, the Galil. It's never going to reach Reuven, who's living in my land in the Galil. Daha ein shayaros mitzuyos. There's no way for word to travel. Hilchach, Kevan den yochal limchos, avagav delo micha lo hefsid bishtikaso, v'haylo lahamachzik lizar bishtaro, shariyodeh she'im bal karka yochal limchos. So we'll say, this isn't, watch what's happening over here. A chazaka, here it is. A chazaka is only meaningful when there could be a macha, an objection. If there can't be a macha, then chazaka is not meaningful, which makes sense, right? Reuven living on my land for 3 years, uncontested, only works when I could have contested it. If I could not have contested it, then ultimately, again, it's not considered to be uncontested, okay? So therefore, again, if I'm in Yehuda, and Reuven is in the Galil, and Reuven is living on my land, and there's no way for me to lodge a complaint because the caravans don't travel from one region to the other. So even if I do lodge an objection in Yehuda, it's not reaching Galil. Therefore, again, the objection is meaningless. Because the objection is meaningless, so Reuven is living there for 3 years, does not establish ownership. What that means, and I will say now, what's the practical ramifications of that? The practical ramifications of that is, Reuven, if you are the true owner, you better make sure to hold on to your star. Because at some point in time, I'm going to get myself to the Galil. So, and when I do, I'm going to object to the fact that you're living on my land. You're going to claim, I've been here 10 years. That's very nice, but you know that I could never have lodged a macha. Therefore, the obligation is upon you to safeguard your document if you really have one. And if you don't have one, that pretty clearly indicates that you're not the owner. So we'll say that's the sugya over here. Really incredible. Let's go back to the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, and that's why halacha lamaisa, ultimately again, Reuven living on my land uncontested for 3 years only really establishes chazaka when we're in the same region. If we're both in Yehuda, we're both in the Galil, or we're both Ever Yarden. Incredible. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, that's not true. Lo amru shalosh shanim ela kedei sheba spamya v'yachsik shana yelchu v'yodu shana v'yavel shana acher. So we'll see this in the Gemara. Rabbi Yehuda apparently disagrees with this. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, that's not true. That's the whole point of chazaka. The whole reason why Chazal made chazaka 3 years is for exactly this kind of reason. Why? For a case where Reuven is living on my land, so let's say he lives there for a year, then somebody could come and travel to me up to a year away, tell me, by the way, Reuven is living on my land, and then that gives me another year to travel to Reuven to be able to go ahead and lodge my complaints. Rabbi Yehuda seems to say that even in cases of where we're living in separate regions, the whole reason why Chazal made Chazaka 3 years was dafka to allow a window for me to object for Reuven's usage, even when Reuven is living far away. So the example Rabbi Yehuda gives is Aspamia, Spain, which apparently again was 1 year travel from Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, we'll say the Rashbam points out something very interesting, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, if I'm living in the same region as Reuven, right? Let's say you're living both in Yehuda, and Reuven uses my land. It doesn't take 3 years for Reuven to establish chazaka, but it's almost instantaneous. Why? Because if halacha l'maisa, I'm living in the same region, and I know that Reuven is living on my land. If it really was my land, then what? I would object immediately. Rabbi Yehuda says this whole 3 year thing is only for people living in my land in faraway places. So 1 year allows, right, established that somebody's living on my land. Then another year for word to get to me, and then a third year for me to get to my property. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the Tanna Kama. Okay, we'll see that machlok is a little bit clearer in the Gemara. So let's analyze. My kasavar Tanna Kama. So we'll say, what does the Tanna Kama hold? Ikasavar macha shelo b'fanav havya macha. So we'll say, if the Tanna Kama holds that the owner has the ability to lodge a complaint, right, or to assert ownership, even not in the presence of the person living on my land, and that is a proper macha. If that's the case, I feel the Yehuda v'gadol nami. So we'll say, even in a case where I'm in Yehuda and Reuven's living in my property in the Galil, I should still be obligated to go ahead and lodge a macha, right? Lodge a complaint. Complaint is the wrong word. You understand? Assert ownership, and that is a way to preserve my ownership over the land. It prevents Reuven from establishing chazaka. And I will say, just so you understand, what's the idea of macha shelo b'fanav havi macha? What does that mean? That even if I assert ownership not to the presence of Reuven, that is a proper assertion of ownership. Why would that work? So we'll see in just a moment. But that works, the Rashbam already points this out, that works with the principle that chavra de chavra islay, the chavra de chavra islay. Your friend has a friend, and the friend of your friend has a friend. That if I go ahead and I make a clap and I say, Maranan v'Rabbanan, Reuven is living on my land in the Galil, and I just want to tell everybody he is not the owner, I am the owner. That logic dictates that what's going to happen, that's going to take on traction, and some way, somehow, at some point, that word is going to reach Reuven. He's going to know that he does not have chazaka, and therefore, if by some stretch of the imagination he is the true owner, he will know to preserve his shtar, his document. So that's how logically that works. So what does the Tanna Kama hold? If the Tanna Kama holds macha shelo b'fanav havi macha, that even a statement, right, an assertion of ownership, not in the presence of the person presently occupying the land, is still a proper assertion, then even when we are in different regions, I should be obligated to go ahead and make my macha. If on the other hand, so the Gemara says, fine. I feel the Yehuda v'Galil nami. But if at the end of the day the Tanna Kama holds that a macha not made in the presence of Reuven living in the Galil is not a macha, then I feel the Yehuda v'Yehuda nami lo. Then even when we're living in the same region, even living in the same region, but again, we're not in close proximity to each other, such a macha should not work. So what's the halacha? The olam kasavar macha shlo b'fanav havi macha. I will say the way we paskin is a macha shlo b'fanav. I will say it's very important. The way the halacha is, and this is halacha l'maisa, that even when you are not in the presence of the person who is occupying your land, you are obligated to make a macha. You're obligated to make a macha, right? In other words, we'll say, so if I know that someone is living in my land, even though we're in different regions, I have an obligation to assert my ownership. That's called macha shelo b'fanav, is havya macha. Is havya macha. So ultimately, I will say, so that is the halacha. That is the halacha, and that works. That macha works, so that now again I've asserted my ownership. Ruvain is now on notice that if he really is the owner of the land, he better hold on to his shtar. He better hold on to his shtar. That's the halacha. So the Gemara says, so what's going on in the Mishnah? Mishnah saying the b'shas chirim shanu. It will say our Mishnah is a different case. Our Mishnah will say shas chirim literally means like a time of emergency or a time of war. There are certain times I will say where, let's say, the borders are closed. The borders are closed. There's such a thing like that countries close borders. Right? There is such a concept, right? So the idea I will say, there's shas chirum means that halacha l'maisa, you can't travel between places. So here's how the halacha operates. The halacha assumes that even if you're living in different regions, word travels. However, in times of war, times of emergency, where borders are shut, word does not travel. You hear this distinction? So therefore, I will say our Mishnah is dealing with a time of emergency or a time of war. In a situation like that, so now I'm in Yehuda, Reuven's living in my land in the Galil. So even if I make a machal in Yehuda, it is not getting to Galil. So because of that, Reuven is on notice, and the burden of proof is upon Reuven to keep his document of ownership. So even if he has lived there for years, he cannot establish chazaka. But under normal circumstances, even if I'm in one geographic area, and Reuven, I'm in Yehuda, or I'm living in place A, Reuven's living or occupying my land in place B, so halacha l'maisa again, I'm still obligated to make a macha, and the assumption is that macha travels. So the Gemara says, "U'mashna Yehuda v'Gal dinakit." So why does the Mishnah then bring up the example of Yehuda and Galil? Hakamash malan. So the Mishnah is going to teach. So we'll say Amud Beis, this tam Yehuda v'Galil k'shas chirum damu. So we'll say actually the Mishnah is going to teach me a different halacha. That actually, interestingly enough, apparently the regions of Yehuda and Galil were always in an emergency or war-like state. That their borders were not porous, right? Their borders were not open. And therefore, again, travel between Yehuda and Galil was very uncommon. So therefore, again, what's coming out of here is as follows, that Yehuda and Galil are an example of non-porous borders, and therefore, again, a macha made in Yehuda is not going to travel to Galil. And therefore, again, if Reuven is living on my land in Galil, and he's going to assert ownership, he needs to make sure to hold on to his shtar for as long as it takes. And it being there for 3 years uncontested is not going to establish ownership on the part of Reuven in the Galil. Okay, so we'll say, but the halacha l'maisa piece that you have to merge with from here is this way the Rambam paskins as well. The macha shelo b'fanav havya macha. Right, an objection, even if it is not made in the presence of the person occupying the land, is still considered to be a bona fide objection, which means it has to be made. So in general, I'll say even if I'm living in one place and Reuven is living in my field in a different place, and I am asserting ownership, I have an obligation to make my macha even in a different region. How is Reuven ever going to hear about it? He's going to hear about it. Why? Chavra de chavra islay, bechavra de chavra de islay. Your friend has a friend, the friend of your friend has a friend. Word travels, except when it doesn't. And when doesn't it? Again, a time of war, a time of emergency. We'll say there are exceptions to every single rule. Okay, incredible. We'll say, just the raya, by the way. The raya that macha shelo b'fanav havya macha is the first Rashi in Bereshis, right? Ultimately, again, Rashi HaKodesh is bothered by why does the Torah begin with Bereshis bar Elokim? Why does Torah begin with this story of creation? Torah is a rule book, right? The Torah is is a legal book. Why begin with the story of creation? I will say, so Rashi HaKodesh explains so beautifully to teach us that the Ribbon Shalom created the world and therefore gave Eretz Yisrael to us. Because He created it, He chooses who gets what, and He chose to give us Eretz Yisrael. So it's almost as if that this Genesis narrative, the story of creation, is a macha'a shelo b'fanav. It is an objection in the face of the nations of the world. Everyone else asserts autonomy and asserts ownership over Eretz Yisrael. The Ribbon Shel, because the Maharal asks, it's very nice that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us the story of creation to assert our ownership over Eretz Yisrael. There's only one problem, which is we're the only people learning that Rashi, right? No one else. So now I get it. It's called the Macha'a Shelo B'fanav. The Ribbon Shalom is making is asserting ownership over the world. He created it, and therefore again He decides who gets what. He gives us Eretz Yisrael. No one but us is reading that Rashi. That's okay. We just paskin Lamed Ches Amud Aleph in Bava Basra. Macha shelo b'fanav havya macha. An objection, even lodged, not in the presence of the other people asserting ownership, is still considered to be a bona fide objection. Incredible. I'm Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Machziki b'nechsei borech. So what's an interesting case over here? You can go ahead and ein machzikin b'nechsei borech. Rabbi Yehuda saying of Rav, you cannot establish a chazaka of property of someone who's running away. In other words, we'll say, now watch this. Let's say Ruvain is running away, and now I go ahead and I live on his land for 3 years. Right? So you can't establish chazaka on property of someone who is running away. Okay? So Ki Amrise Kamei de Shmuel Amarli. So I'm sorry, Ki Amrise Kamei de Shmuel Amarli V'chi Limchos B'fanav Utzarech. I don't understand, why not? Why not? Why can't I make a chazaka on property of someone who's running away? After all, again, even though let's say it's Ruvain's land, even if Ruvain is even if Ruvain is on the run, let him lodge a macha from wherever he is. In other words, what did we just establish? We just established macha shelo b'fanav havya macha, that the owner of the land has the ability to go ahead and lodge or assert ownership wherever he may be. So even if Reuven is on the run, he should still be able to assert ownership. So what is Rav coming to teach me? Macha shelo b'fanav lo havya macha. So maybe Rav is coming to say, maybe Rav is saying, maybe the whole point is Rav is saying, I hold macha shelo b'fanav lo havya macha. No, in order for an objection, right, or an assertion of ownership to be halachically meaningful, it has to be made in the presence of the occupier. So Gemara says, but that's not true. But that's not true. Rav is on record as saying, as possibly we saw before, that macha shel b'fanav is havya macha. So what's going on over here? Rav taima de tana didan kamefaresh v'lei lo svirle. You're right. Rav was just highlighting the opinion of the Tana. In other words, we'll say, remember again, this is a machlokas, so there is an opinion that holds macha shel b'fanav lo havya macha. That again, an assertion of ownership made not in the presence of the occupier is not a meaningful assertion. Is not a meaningful assertion. There is an opinion that holds that way, and therefore Rav was espousing a case in conformance with that opinion, but that's not how Rav himself paskins. Okay, that's one possibility. An alternate version of this is, so let's listen to this. Now, an alternate version of this. Alternate version of this is like this, right? Ruvain is running away. Ruvain's on the run. I live on his field for 3 years, and I assert chazaka. Rav says, this is a proper chazaka. I can establish chazaka even in the property of someone who is on the run. So Kiamri, you say, Kamei de Shmuel. So when this was given over in the presence of Shmuel, Amrali Pshita, so Shmuel said, that's obvious. Of course, we paskin macha shelo b'fanav havya macha. So therefore, again, if Reuven was the true owner, even though Reuven is on the run, Reuven is still obligated to what? What is he obligated to do? He's obligated to make a macha. He's obligated to assert ownership. And again, that's fine because macha shelo b'fanav havya macha, right? An assertion of ownership, even if it's made not in the presence of the occupier, is still a proper assertion. To which the Gemara says, Amalei Pshita, what is Rav coming to teach us? Is Rav just coming to teach us that, again, an assertion of ownership made not in the presence of the occupier is a proper assertion? We've already learned that. Rav already said that. Rav already made that point. Listen to this. So I will say this is interesting. Coming to teach us the following. Let's say, let's play out this case over here, right? I'm living on land that was at one point in time owned by Ruvain. Ruvain now is on the run. Ruvain's on the run. Ruvain lodges his macha. But listen to this. He says his macha in front of two people. And I will say, by the way, I just want to point out what we have not yet done, and this is actually the next sugya, is what does a macha look like? In other words, we're talking about this concept of if you're the owner of land and you want to protect your ownership and you want to prevent someone else from forming chazaka, you have to assert ownership. What does that ownership assertion look like? We haven't gotten to that yet. That's literally the next sugya. And I'll say, but obviously what it does is, it obviously entails on some level making a formal declaration of ownership in front of, I don't know, two witnesses. That's what it sounds like. So let's say Ruvain now is on the run, and Ruvain makes this assertion. But he makes this assertion in front of two people who can't spread the word. For example, they're crippled. They're crippled. Neither of them have the ability to walk, Rahman al-Islam. They can't walk. So now, watch this. So now Ruvain's on the run. Ruvain says, listen, Silber is living on my land, but I just want you to know, it's not his land. It's my land. It's my land. I'm making an assertion of ownership. But he makes that assertion of ownership in front of two witnesses who cannot travel. So they can't spread the word. It still works. It still works. Why? Because Ravanan said, I heard, right, in the name of Rabbi Shmuel, that if the owner asserts ownership in the presence of two people who have the ability to convey the macha, they have mobility. Then ultimately, again, this is a machal. This is a proper assertion. What happens, however, on the other hand, if halacha l'maisa, one asserts ownership in the presence of two people who can't convey the information. Rahman al-Islam, they're crippled. They have the inability to travel. So then what's the halacha? Lo havya macha. Ultimately, again, it does not work. So we'll say this is the opinion of Mar Shmuel. And again, this gets into the mechanics of macha. That macha only works if you give it over. So we'll say, first of all, the Gemara seems to be saying over here, and we'll see this more definitively in tomorrow's daf, is macha has to be done in front of two witnesses. That's the way macha works, right? You make a macha, which makes sense. I'm asserting my ownership in the presence of two people. Mar Shmuel comes along and says, by the way, it's not just two people. It's two people who have the ability themselves to travel and to convey this. But if you give over the macha in front of two people who don't have the ability to convey it, then halacha l'maisa, it doesn't work. However, on the other hand, v'rav chavra islay, the chavra islay. Ultimately, again, Rav on the other hand says, no, that's not true. Even if the two people can travel, halacha l'maisa, again, your friend has friends and the friend of your friend has friends. In other words, I don't need the two people themselves to go over and give over this information. Rather, what do I need them to do? I need them to tell their friends, and their friends will tell their friends until ultimately, again, word travels. So Rabbi says, this is actually very interesting. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, what seems to be coming out over here is as follows. What began as a discussion about being able to make a chazaka on the property of someone who's running away actually became something different. It became about, do you need, when making your macha, do the witnesses you're making your macha in front of have to have mobility or not? Mar Shmuel says yes, and Rav says no. We're actually going to see that halacha l'maisa, we paskin like Rav. The witnesses in front of whom you are making your assertion of ownership need not have mobility. For the simple reason is, I don't need those two guys to be the actual guys who deliver the machal to Ruvain. Rather, again, what just has to happen is word has to get out. So because it just has to be word that has to get out, even if those two initial witnesses don't have mobility, it still works. And I'll say, how do we pass halacha l'maisa by the boreach case? The hilchasa. Amar Rabbi Rav Zilchasa ein machzikin b'nichsei boreach. So I say the halacha is you can't make a chazaka ultimately again in the property of someone who's running away. Umacha shelo b'fanav havya macha. But I will say ultimately again a macha, assertion of ownership that is lodged even not in the presence of the occupier, is a proper assertion. So the Gemara says that's contradictory rulings. I will say, if macha shelo b'fanav havya macha, that an assertion of ownership, even not in the presence of the person who is currently occupying, is a proper assertion, then what? Even someone who's on the run should be obligated to make a macha, right? In which case, halacha l'maaseh, if he doesn't, you should be able to make a chazak on his property. So those are two contradictory rulings. Lo kasha, kan boreach machmas mamon, kan boreach machmas marden. This is very interesting, I will say. Everything depends in life as to why you're on the run, right? When a person is on the run because of financial matters, so then halacha l'maaseh, it's okay. They just need to get out of Dodge, right? But they don't mind divulging their whereabouts as long as they're not in town. The collectors cannot collect their debt. When someone is running because they stand accused of a capital crime, let's say of murder, chas v'shalom, then they have to be very careful about concealing their whereabouts. So therefore, again, if let's say if Reuven is on the run because he's avoiding his debts, he has an obligation to make a macha, and failure to make a macha ultimately again will result in me being able to establish chazaka. If on the other hand Reuven is on the run because he's accused of killing someone, he's accused of murder, chas v'shalom, then what? He has to be very secretive about his whereabouts. He has an inability to lodge a macha, because if he does so, people will discover exactly where he's hiding out, and that's going to be a problem. Therefore, again, my sustained usage of the property does not establish chazaka. Okay, so it's interesting, but again, just to be clear, but our established piece about macha shelo b'fanav havi macha, that still remains in place. That is how we paskin. So you can make an assertion of ownership. You have an obligation to make an assertion of ownership, even not in the presence of the occupier. One more line of us. Let's at least begin this. So what's interesting. Now, after all of that, we get to what is macha. How do you do macha? Amar Rav Zivid, planya gazalnuhu lo havi macha. So we'll say, watch this. So now Reuven's living on my land. So if I go over to witnesses and I say, witnesses, guys, Reuven is a thief, that is not a macha. That is not a macha. However, planya gazalnuhu dinakit leila arebe gazlanusa, or top of lamates, ulamachar tavana lebedina havya macha. So I'll say now, but if I say in front of witnesses, Reuven is a thief, and tomorrow I'm going to take him to Beis Din, that's a macha. So we'll say, hear that distinction? So to make a declarative statement, which is almost like character assassination, Reuven is a thief, that's not a macha. To say Reuven is a thief and Reuven is living on my property, and tomorrow I'm taking him to Beis Din, ultimately again, that is a macha. So I will say, I saw something incredibly beautiful. That ultimately, again, that just in the name of Rabbi, in the name of the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, who say as follows: that I will say this idea of what's a macha, that Reuven, right? If I go over to it and say Reuven is a thief, and tomorrow I'm taking him to Din. That's called a macha. So the Talmidei Baal Shem Tov say something so beautiful. They say, Kimokein, Amar Shah Gazlon. So we'll say the Gazlon, the thief, right, is a metaphor for the Yetzer Hara. Right? So what happens? So sometimes in life, I come along and I say, you know what, the Yetzer Hara, he's occupying my field. The Yetzer Hara right now has a hold over me. Right? Ve'ein anu yecholim la'amod negdo ki kashal koach hasava. But sometimes the Yetzer Hara is occupying my field, he's occupying me, and I'm powerless to do anything about it right now in the moment. Avazos nishar lanu negdo la'amod v'limchos shu gazlan v'noked bano begazlanusa. V'hainu she'al yidei shanu medabrim divrei Torah af she'in anu b'madrega zos klal v'klal baram lazeh davar mahani t'namarim ba'atzmenu sherotzim nios tveke b'kedusha. So I will say, this is incredible. What's a macha? A macha is when I go over to witnesses and I say, something is wrong. something is broken. Can I do anything about that which is broken right now? Can I do? I want to say, think about this just a moment. I'm going over to witnesses. I want to say to witnesses, Reuven is living on my field. He's a gazlan. He's stealing from me. Right? What am I doing about it right now? What am I doing? What am I doing? Nothing. What am I saying? But tomorrow, I'm taking him to Beis Din. Says Lashon V'Akadosh, something so beautiful. Sometimes in life, I am in a personalistic state of disrepair. And for whatever the reason, I'm not able to do something about it right now. The Rebbe says that sometimes we think that just because you can't take present action, there's nothing to do. It's not true. Sometimes on a ruchnius level, you have to make a macha as well. The macha says, I know that my life is not as it should be. I know that I am not as I should be. Am I doing something about it right now? Does it matter right now? No. But I will say, but sometimes just being able to articulate that things need to be different, that creates a new reality as well. The same way that what does macha do? Macha prevents Reuven from asserting ownership. Macha says, Reuven, it's not yours. It's not yours. I'm not doing anything about it now. I'll go to Beis Din tomorrow. So right now you're living on the land like you're the owner. But I'm just saying, right, I'm making a declaration. I'm making a declaration so as to preserve the status quo that I'm the owner and you're not. The Rebbe says sometimes in Ruchnis it works the same way as well. I know that there are changes that need to be made. I know that I am not as I should be. My life is not as I should be. But for whatever the reason, I'm not able to make the changes right now. Even if you can't make the changes you need to make a macha. Make a macha. Let the Yetzer Hara know that you are the owner of your life, that you are the owner of your neshama, that you are the owner of your circumstances. I can't affect the change I need to right now. That's fine. Well, it's not fine, but it's okay for now. But at least if I make the macha, at least I assert ownership over me. And at some point in time, I'll put into place the changes that need to be made, affect the cathartic changes that need to be made, and reclaim ownership over myself. We'll stop over here for today. Shkayach, everyone. Good Shabbos. All right, Chavran Zoom. Good Shabbos, everyone.